Okay, hello everyone. Like to welcome you. My name is Kim Snyder with Train and Simple, and I'd like to welcome you to Introduction to the Infusionsoft API. By my watch, it is the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. What I would like to do before I launch into the presentation, though, is just confirm with you that you can hear me okay. So if you would just go to your question box in the GoToWebinar control panel and type in and just say yes, that you can hear me, I would appreciate that. Would hate to, thank you, excellent. Hate to have gotten well into this program and figure out that nobody can hear me. So good. Looks like all of the technology is working appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Really excited to share with you the Infusionsoft API this afternoon. So um, another way to think about what we're going to be talking about today is it's programming for entrepreneurs. Now, that said, I have a little confession to make, and that is that I am not a programmer. I don't aspire to be a programmer. 2 years ago, I didn't know an HTTP post from a fence post. But the fact is, I didn't know anything about investing 20 years ago either, but that didn't stop me from creating a investment method to that was originally well, I'll just tell you the story. I might as well. It's a good story, right? And so really quickly though, 20 years ago or so, I made a lot of money as a young woman in an IPO and turned it over to a big name brokerage firm who promptly lost it all for me. And so I decided to figure out how to invest my own money. And in educating myself and trying to make certain that I didn't ever find myself in that situation again, I developed an investment method, a very unique investment method that was a very new concept at the time, which was investing for income rather than appreciation. And I used it to manage my own money for a number of years. I gradually, some of my friends started to ask me to teach it to them, which I did, and then I was teaching it to my friends' friends and my friends' parents, and that those humble beginnings eventually grew into a registered investment advisor firm. At its peak, we had over $500 million in my investment method, and I've taught it to over 4,000 people over the years. We were in 2008, we were number 829 on the Inc. 5000 list. 2009, we were on the Dallas 100 list of fastest growing privately held companies in the DFW area. We were the 2010 five-star wealth manager for client satisfaction in a market, I might add, that when the world was coming to an end in 2010, if you remember. So um, you know, I tell you this for a couple of reasons. One, I want you to, I guess, understand that where I'm coming from and where my passion really is, and that is in learning things and sharing them with other people. And in particular, I think that pattern has been to solve problems for myself and then turn around and share those solutions with other people. I also want you to understand that to me, this is all a means to an end, which is growing businesses, whether they be, um, your business, your client's business, a consulting business, what have you. But nonetheless, the point is to use your tools to grow a business, and I am all about that. Um, so that's a little bit about my background and kind of how I came to be here, really. I'm also a professional speaker, and I wrote a book called How to Be the Family CFO. And so, in the course of doing speeches, I became heavily involved in the National Speakers Association. And the National Speakers Association is actually how I found Infusionsoft. Infusionsoft is a large, I guess like they're the platinum sponsor of most NSA conventions and conferences, and they were always there in the marketplace, and I would go chat with them. And I was a longtime Salesforce user. All of my companies ran for about 7 years on Salesforce. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to make Salesforce do the sorts of marketing automation things that Infusionsoft will do out of the box. And I was always intrigued by the potential of Infusionsoft. And I finally, a couple years ago, took the leap and decided to really get serious and investigate what Infusionsoft had to offer for my companies, and ended up switching a number of them over to Infusionsoft. So I was a happy camper, because suddenly all of those cool ideas that I had come up with in terms of automating my business and really leapfrogging the growth numbers that I was looking for. I had that potential on my desktop, for a while. But maybe you can relate to this picture. What I actually ended up with fairly quickly was a bit of frustration at Infusionsoft, quite frankly. And the reason I became so frustrated with it was, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. I would have these great ideas, these campaigns and different things that I wanted to do, and I would go to implement them, and I would get 90% of the way through that implementation, and I would hit a roadblock. There would be something that I couldn't quite do exactly the way that I wanted it to do. And so I spent a ton of time and a ton of brain space, and then only to hit this roadblock, and be stopped. And for me, that was immensely frustrating. What I felt like was like I had been given this really cool puzzle with this really awesome, beautiful picture on the front of it with like 10,000 pieces, and you sit and you work on that puzzle for a couple of weeks, and you get all the way to the end, and you realize that, oh man, there's like three pieces missing. How frustrating is that? And that's really where I found myself with Infusionsoft. We have all of these really, if you think about it, really powerful systems, that fit together in order to create this marketing automation. We have, web forms and tags, which Salesforce doesn't have, and um, order forms and action sets and all of these things, but there's always this piece missing. And so as I began to try to figure out, well, how do I complete these projects that I'm and these ideas and get them implemented over and over and over again, the word that I heard was API. You need, oh yeah, we can do that, but you need the API to be able to do that. Well, that's just great, except, well, the API isn't really a supported part of Infusionsoft. And number two, I don't know API. I'm not a programmer. I don't know how to do that. But I would go to masterminds, and that was always the answer. Oh, Jordan Hatch would say, oh, you need the API for that. I go to the forums and I'd say, how do I do this? And they'd say, oh, you need the API for that. So I did what probably many of you have done. I went out and I hired someone to write my first couple of scripts. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, a script is really just a short little piece of code, that is written to perform a very specific function. And so had someone write a programmer, a developer, Infusionsoft developer that I found in the marketplace, had him write my first couple of scripts. And want to take a guess at how much my first script cost? My first script was $1,500. Now, granted, it wasn't a little script. It wasn't that simple of a script, but 1,500 bucks. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking to myself, this is a problem because I need a bunch of these in order to, my businesses are not simple business. Well, some of them are, but in particular, one or two are not simple businesses. And in order to be able to do the things that I really wanted Infusionsoft to do, I was going to need a bunch of these things. And I was just looking at those dollars and saying, suddenly this great bargain that I had was not economically feasible anymore. Not to mention, it's one thing to pay for it, but it's another thing to find someone, a good developer, who's available to write them for you, right? Which is in this with Infusionsoft kind of growing the way it is, that was also a struggle. So that was pretty frustrating. So guess what I did? Well, based on the story that I told you to begin with, you can probably guess that what I did was I decided that I would go out and figure out this API thing on my own. Well, guess how that went? Not so well. I have to tell you, not well at all. Um, that was me again. Well, it's my pouty face, not my happy dance. Well, so why? Why did it not go so well? Well, first of all, there is no, let's call it a dummies guide to the Infusionsoft API. Yes, there's documentation, and it turns out it's really, really good documentation. But all of that is really only helpful when you know what you're talking about. And I didn't know what I was talking about. I'm not a programmer. I didn't know what any of that meant. Sure, you can give me a code snippet, but what do I do with it? So there was no dummies guide, no getting started guide. So that was a big hurdle. I would go to the forum and search and try to find answers. And although there are a number of people who very talented people who do contribute to the forums on a regular basis, they are the minority. And I found that the forums were largely the blind leading the blind in many cases. And even when the information that I got was good, it was incomplete. It was cryptic. You know, someone would say, "Oh yeah, you do A, B, and C." Okay, well, I needed more than that. How do I do A, B, and C? I'm not even sure what A, B, and C means. I don't know what JSON and REST and curl and all this mess is. What are you telling me? I don't, I don't, even seemingly simple things were really not. And, just everyone spoke Greek or geek. I got actually everyone spoke geek. That's it. And I didn't speak geek. And so it was a challenge. It absolutely was not easy. But it turns out that it was so worth it. I am so glad, because I'll tell you, as I was trying to figure all this stuff out, not only was it difficult, but at the same time, I worried that I couldn't do it. Not that I wasn't smart, because I know I'm smart, but I'm not a programmer. So was I going to be able to figure this out? I worried that if I did figure it out, that I might break something and then never be able to fix it again, or have to pay someone a ton of money to be able to fix it. And I certainly, as a business owner and entrepreneur, I worried about the time commitment that I was putting into trying to learn this, because it was a major amount of time commitment. Even once I learned it, forget the learning process, but even as kind of a what I call a baby coder, you know, it would take me 8 hours to write a script that someone else that does this for a living might do in an hour in the beginning. So that, and for me, time is money, and time is a lot of money. And in fact, I would say, it's time is my most valuable commodity. So the time issue was for me a very, very big one. But I can tell you this, and I can tell you this absolutely unequivocally, that now, having gotten over that learning curve and into where I am now, I can honestly say to you that learning the API has been the single best thing that I've done for my businesses in easily the last 5 years. They had become kind of stagnant, and I had become kind of stagnant, and quite frankly, it really was the missing puzzle piece. It was the piece, or that key, that I needed to unlock the potential of Infusionsoft and really be able to make. I like to say it enables me to bend Infusionsoft to my will. Now my mantra is, if you can dream it, I can do it. Whereas before it was like, oh, I don't know if we can do that. It's just a totally, totally different mindset. And if you need any confirmation about what I'm telling you, then the easiest way to confirm that is to look at the Infusionsoft Ultimate Marketers. For those of you who are not familiar with the Ultimate Marketer contest, it's something that Infusionsoft does every year at InfusionCon. They run a contest for basically the companies, it's almost like a little Inc. 5000 or Inc. 500 contest within Infusionsoft. They look for those companies that are growing the fastest and have used Infusionsoft to catapult the growth of their companies in really major ways. And then they present an Ultimate Marketer of the Year award at InfusionCon every year. And if you go back and look at all of those people, Bob Britton, Jermaine Griggs, the Iron Tribe Fitness, all those guys who have won over the years, and even the finalists, without exception, really, you will find that none of those people are just using Infusionsoft out of the box. I mean, they can't, because Infusionsoft out of the box is pretty limited, and that is on purpose. Just to take a little detour with you, that's becoming more and more on purpose. And this is not a bad thing or an indictment. It's a strategic decision on the part of Infusionsoft. However, Infusionsoft is fond of saying these days that simple is the easy is the new normal, or simple is the new normal. I forget what they say, but which is great. But what that means by the flip side of that means that limited is the new normal, because the easier they make the interface, the more for the average user, the less functionality is available to the power user. And increasingly, the power user has to go to the API, which is fine, because quite frankly, that interface is just clunky and a pain for you. When it's great when you just want to do something simple. Don't get me wrong, I use it all the time. However, what the API is, just in case you're wondering, is forget the technical part of API. The kind of dummy explanation that I think of when I think of the API is a way for you to talk directly to the brain of Infusionsoft without the limitations or filters of the user interface. So I can go right to the brain and say, I want you to do this, or I want you to tell me that, without all that mess around it and without all those limitations, frankly. And so when you learn how to have those very direct, quick, conversations with the brain of Infusionsoft, suddenly you can make it do some really, really amazing things. And those are the sorts of things that create Infusionsoft Ultimate Marketers. So if you look, that's what you're going to see. Now, I will just tell you that, I already run 4 businesses, and I absolutely was not looking for another one. In fact, what I enjoy doing the most, and my passion is doing this. My thing is playing polo, and which is a very time intensive, resource intensive sport. My husband and I have recently, in the last couple of years, moved to South Carolina and are building a farm where, in the middle of polo heaven, so that I can, play polo at every possible opportunity. My office is actually in my barn. If you could see where I'm sitting right now, I can turn my head 90 degrees and look out the window at all my horses in the barn. So this is my thing. My time is, I have a lot going on. My time is precious and valuable to me, and because I want to spend it doing the things that are most fun for me. And building businesses is fun for me. Playing polo is fun for me. Turns out, I guess, this is fun for me too, though, because I have found this API and the ability to brandish it like a sword to be so powerful for myself and for my clients. And because I do love to share, I don't know why this is my thing, but it is taking information that's out there and synthesizing it down into a way that's easy to understand, and then turning around and teaching it and sharing it with other people. And I mean share, not teach. What I love to do is be part of a process with people, not just talk at them. And then to see their eyes light up and be part of the results that they get with what it is that I've taught them. I've been blessed for 10 years to be able to do that with all of my investment clients. And but also a little bit because quite frankly, you've got this amazing tool, which I would say to you is the best kept secret in Infusionsoft, and it just shouldn't be this hard for someone to learn it. And no one else has done it, so I guess I am. um what I did was as I was figuring out how to teach it to myself, and then starting to teach it to some other people, and try to figure out what was the best way to teach it to other people. What I came up with was this concept called the API for Beginners Learning Lab. And I'm really, really excited about it because what I believe I am able to do with the Learning Lab is take someone like me who is an absolute beginner, with little or no understanding of who. I will say, an Infusionsoft. Let me say this: I could take an Infusionsoft power user with little or no understanding of programming, and actually teach them how to do amazing things with Infusionsoft, easily, not with years and years of study. Um, because and the reason we're able to do this, it's a big promise, right, to be able to say that you can actually, after a week's learning, you can actually go out and do something meaningful with the API in your business. But the reason I can make that promise is here. As I was learning, here's what I discovered. What I discovered was you don't need a lot. This is truly the 80-20 principle at work. 20% of the effort gets you 80% of the results. 20%, there are these very basic building blocks that are pretty on their own. They're pretty simple and straightforward. And they're all you really need to get. They're the 20% that gets you 80% of the result. Now, if you need more than 80% of the result, you're still going to have to go out and hire a developer, unless this becomes something that you really take a shine to and decide that you want to become better at it. And that's, and you could do that. But when you're sitting there in the middle of the night and you just need, this one thing done, kind of stuff, then, these little simple building blocks will get the job done for you. And so not only are they simple and easy to understand and easy to teach, and there's not very many of them, quite frankly. There's four basic ones, and you can add on maybe two more, maybe three more. If you got the other two or three, the additional two or three, then you've really got a pretty good toolbox. And so what happens is, once you get comfortable with those simple building blocks, then all we're doing is taking those little building blocks and we are combining them together in what amounts to just a really basic logical flow to create something which is more complex, and yet more powerful, and more profitable, in terms of making Infusionsoft do these really meaningful things for your business. So it's, you look at these code, and I'll show you a couple of my scripts before we get off of this call, and you look at it and you think, oh my gosh, that looks like, look at all those lines of code and it's just Greek. And no, look, it's just like this. It's a bunch of circles and squares just stacked one on top of the other in a really logical order to create a pattern that works. That's really all this at our level. I'm not saying at the higher levels, okay, that you pay people, tens of thousands of dollars for. At our level, at the programming for entrepreneur level, which is what I'm talking about here. Now, here's the other thing that I discovered. We aren't making those blocks. We aren't manufacturing those blocks, right? It's not like you have to have woodworking skills here. Not in this day and age of the internet. Now, that, few years ago, maybe that was going to be true. But the fact of the matter is that writing code is kind of an oxymoron now, because you don't really, again, at our level, write code. You research and you cut and paste. Everything that you need, every one of those building blocks is available out there in the wild on the internet, and it's easily found. So if you can do a few simple searches and you start to learn the language, this is one of the key things, right? You learn the language that people are using to describe what it is that you're trying to do, then finding those little code snippets that you need, cutting and pasting them and modifying them to fit your specific scenario is really, really easy. So it is as simple as cut and paste. And actually, and this kind of goes into how I teach the API now. There's really three phases to learning how to do this. And phase one is not writing code; it's reading it. If I can teach you how to read it in plain English to yourself, which is one of the beauties of PHP, which is the language that we use to talk to the API. PHP is a very forgiving programming language, and it reads, it's not quite as easy as some others, but it reads, you can just kind of almost read it out loud to yourself in English. And once you're able to do that, you'll be 65% of the way there. Because once you can read it, you understand what's happening. Then the next step is to modify it, not to write it, but take what someone else has written. Some of the code snippets that I give you are out of our code library or the API cookbook that we're creating, and just modify the relevant parts for the task that you're trying to accomplish. So first it's reading it, then it's modifying it, and then third is to be able to write the filler material. So you may have these three building blocks, and those have been basically written for you. You've modified them, which is the equivalent of slapping some paint on them. But there's a little bit of code in the middle of them that makes them fit together. So eventually, then you've got to learn how to do that. But again, that's pretty simple stuff. That's loops and really basic stuff that I can teach you quite easily. When you start out off, you're looking at this, and at least for me, when I look at a piece of code that someone's written, it looks really, really, really intimidating. But what I'm telling you is I can actually get you to the point fairly quickly where it's really not that difficult and not intimidating at all. So with that as a backdrop, what I'd like to do is give you a sneak peek at the API for Beginners Learning Lab so that you can understand and learn, whether you take the API Learning Lab or not. You can start to understand about these building blocks and how we fit them together, and just how one might go about learning the API, and how to create these results for yourself in your applications. Um, so what the way that I'm doing the API for Beginners Learning Lab is this. I started out, and if you look at the website, I actually describe it differently than what I'm about to describe to you. I need to go back and actually change, because I started out kind of with a classic sort of teacher's approach to teaching this. Sequentially, you got to know this, and then you got to know this, and you got to know this, and then and I tried that, and it's just not what I think there's a better way. And what I decided was the better way is to do it this way, which is to take a real life project. And by real life, what I mean is it was actually one of my projects. That I just completed not very long ago from my own business. Actually, forget business. The project was for this webinar for what it the well, I should just go show it to you, right? Um, so I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's a real life project that I use in my business that I wrote, And what we're going to do is we're going to take that project, which is not a small one, but not a massive one, not a really complicated one either. And we're just going to together break it down into its bite-sized pieces, help you understand those bite-sized pieces, and then teach you how to build it back up into the project. So and because it involves all four of the major building blocks that I think you need to get 80% of the result. If we can get through this project in a week, which I think we can, then I will have taught you in a very functional way what you need to know. So with that, I'm going to actually show you a couple things here. I'm going to leave my presentation and move over here uh, to a description of what it is that we're going to do now. So I know this kind of looks maybe a little scary, but it's the easiest way for me to describe what we're going to be doing in the learning lab. So here's our real life project. My real life project was that I wanted to be able to send a text message to people like you who were going to attend this webinar, 1 hour roughly before the webinar. And this was one of those things where this is like classic example of where you would think, well, this should be easy. And because there's field timers and all these things in the campaign, and you think, well, how hard can this be, right? And I got almost all the way through, and I hit a roadblock. Does anybody know what the roadblock was that I hit? Well, you may or may not realize it, but the field timers in the campaign builder don't go as granular as 1 hour before something. The closest you can get is 1 day before something. And I didn't want, it wasn't going to do me any good to send you a text message 1 day before the webinar. I can send you an email for that, right? A text message, the whole point is the immediacy of it. I wanted to send it an hour before, but there is absolutely no way in Infusionsoft to send something an hour before a date time. So I had to stop and build it myself. So I actually, in my screencasts, I call this roll your own custom field timer. Because that's basically what we're going to do. And it's a really cool project which involves the four building blocks, which you can see there, the four here on these little yellow clouds. They're the Infusionsoft API, a MySQL database, cron, which I'll explain all these, and curl. With these four, you can do so much. So because this was a really easy mixing and matching of these four little building blocks, I decided I would use this for my next API learning lab. And what we'll do is we won't keep the same project forever. After a while, we'll switch it up and we'll do a different project in learning lab, and we'll keep changing these up and offering different ideas and building blocks, but this is the one I'm using right now. So let me just so you understand how this all works, let me just take you through the flow chart of this, so you can understand why I tell you that these are your four little building blocks. So here's how we do this. So we've got these little swim lanes here. Here's Infusionsoft. I have two scripts. I have one called text reminder add.php. And I have one over here called text reminder cron.php. So the job of text reminder add is to, when someone fills out a web form, it's to add their name to a MySQL database. All right. And here's my MySQL database. And then we have text reminder cron. So let me just step through this and I'll explain it so you can see what happens. So basically what's going to happen is in Campaign Builder, I have a webinar registration form. You all know that because you filled it out. And you also know that the second page, the thank you page of that webinar registration form said, would you like me to send you a text reminder? And if you had put your phone number, your mobile phone number, Some of you, by the way, put put misformatted phone numbers in there. But if you put your mobile phone number in there, what was going to happen is this. First of all, your contact got written to my Infusionsoft application. Pretty standard stuff, you know that. What you signed up for, what webinar, all those things. You got tagged. All the standard stuff happened here between this form and Infusionsoft right here, contact table. But then what happened is behind the scenes, using the Infusionsoft API, which is building block number 1, we come along back behind here and we have this little script called text reminder add. And what text reminder add does is it uses an API call to go out to the Infusionsoft contact table and say, can you pass me back, please, the date that this person wanted to attend the webinar, because I need that. So it asks for it from Infusionsoft. Infusionsoft gives it back. So now the script has it to use. So all right, so I know who this person is and I know what date they wanted to attend the webinar, date and time, by the way. So it says now, because Infusionsoft can't really work with this information the way we want it to, what we're going to do, this is one of the most powerful things. When I discovered this, like blew my whole world apart. What we're going to do is, instead of just storing it in Infusionsoft, we're going to store it in a MySQL database, which is so much more flexible and easier to work with and available to my scripts any way I want them. We're just going to take and insert in the database the contact ID, their mobile phone number, when we're supposed to send the text, and when the text was actually sent. 4 simple little records. Now, before I go on, I want to stop and I want to show you this stuff. Okay, so we have building blocks number 1 and 2, the Infusionsoft API and a MySQL database. So let's just have a quick look at this. Okay, switch screens on you again. So let's just start with, I'm going to go over here to something simpler. Okay, this is a little script called test.php. And I use this all the time. Basically what this does, this is actually how I start every one of my little scripts. So if you've never seen PHP, it's really simple. It opens with this. Can you guys see this? I better make this bigger so you can see it. Okay, so this open bracket question mark PHP says to the server, okay, what you're about to encounter is PHP, so process it as PHP. And this down here says, okay, that's the end of the PHP. Everything in between, this is PHP. Okay, great. So we have just a little thing that says just print on the screen hello world, so that I know that we're talking to the script. This stuff hooks up the Infusionsoft ISDK to our server, or to our script rather. Now, for those of you who don't know what the ISDK is, this is awesome. Remember I told you you don't have to write anything? Well, that's true of Infusionsoft as well. Here's the API Basics page in Infusionsoft, Developers API Basics. When you click on this page, go to the bottom down here, it says PHP SDK. I mean, software development kit or something is what that stands for. But what you need to know is it's these little code snippets, these little building blocks that Infusionsoft has made available to do all of these different functions. And there's tons of them. So if you go here to API services and methods, it actually documents all of these little pieces of code that are available to you and what each one does. So I'll just show you that before I go show it to you in my script, just so you know. So here in the where I went was developers, API services, and methods. So we'll just take, for example, here are the services. We have, you can see, an affiliate service, contact service, data service, discount service, email, file, funnel, invoice. These should kind of sound, as an Infusionsoft user, these should kind of make some sense to you about what they are and what they do. So if I click on contact service, because we're going to be working with a contact, for example, so you don't have to memorize anything. This is so key for you to understand. Everything's written down. you can find everything and you can cut and paste everything. You just have to know where to find it. That's it, right? So you have this little contact service dot add creates a new contact record from the data passed in the array. And if you come down here, there's a little code snippet like this that shows you exactly how to add a contact record. And all you got to do is cut and paste, right? Fill in the right information and put this in the right place and it'll work. So when I say hook up the SDK, it's a file that sits on your server that basically controls all of these little snippets, okay? And I tell you, by the way, in fact, you will receive at the end of this webinar for attending, you will receive our getting started guide, and in it it steps you through step by step how to set all this up on your server, so that you can actually run this script that I'm looking at right here on your server when you follow those instructions. So this hook says, okay, we need the SDK because we're going to be using that. We're going to borrow all those little code snippets, and then it says, okay, if my app is connected, if we were successful in connecting to our Infusionsoft application, then just tell me that's connected, and if it isn't, tell me it's not connected. Perfect. And then what you have down here, okay, is this is an API call right here. Okay, this is straight out of the SDK, and what it says is for contact ID 16589 and group ID 1155. Now, a group in API language is a tag. So for tag number 1155, okay, what we want you to do is, you can see this little call here, group remove. What do you think that does? Well, if you know that a group is a tag, you can probably guess that it's going to remove tag number 1155 from contact ID 16589. That's it. That's all you got to do to remove that tag from that contact using an API. That's all it is. Now, what did I have to do? I had to do a little bit of cut and paste. That's it. So this is what I mean when I say API call, which is building block number 1 in our flowchart right here, Infusionsoft API. That's how what we use to go to the database and say, could I have the date of that webinar? Well, what it used there was it actually used a different service called data service to do that. And the data service, it's called data service. Come on, I got a lot going with this webinar, and I'm in the country in a barn with a really slow internet connection. I used to have and live in Dallas and do, because I was a speaker and all this stuff. We used to do broadcasts actually out of my house, and I had I had a pipe that was the size of an internet pipe, the size of a water main, coming into my house in Dallas, and now here I am in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, with like less than 1 MIP, but it's okay because life's about trade-offs, and my horses are outside my window. But so here's the data service, and so what we did is we used dataservice.query to query contact record and say, can you give us back the webinar date, please? Which is this little code snippet right here. Okay. So that was number 1. Now, going back to our flow chart here, now I told you that the next thing it did was it inserted the ID in the mobile and the send and the sent in a MySQL database. So I want to show you this as well, because this is like an underused and so powerful, so powerful. Every hosting account, pretty much, I mean, I don't know, there may be some like really, I can't imagine, but I'm sure there must be some that don't have it. But all the regular ones, for the most part, give you as many MySQL databases as you want. Most of them have unlimited. Some of them may have limits on them, but they almost all have it. Now I happen to be using HostGator here. Come on, HostGator, go back to your home page, your control panel here. I should have been on the other page. I apologize. But so it's really super simple to set up a MySQL database. And I'm not going to do it here. Even though it's super simple, it would take us a couple minutes, and we don't but we'll do it together in the class for sure. But it's just so you know, it's down here in the control panel, databases, MySQL databases. You click on that, and all you got to do is say add a database. And I mean, once someone shows it to you, like, here's all my databases here. And once someone shows it to you, you're like, oh my gosh, really? That's easy. And then, so once I've got, let's get this going back to home while I'm doing this. So this is just a view into a database, right? So here's our database called Webinar Reminders. And here's my fields: ID, mobile number, send, sent. Okay, really simple. And then all I'm doing here, building block number 4, or 2 rather, building block number 4. Why do I keep saying 4? Building block number 2 is, here's my little text reminder add script.php. And I apologize that I can't make this part appear a little bigger for you, but that's what this is. And I'll increase the text size on this a little bit. So here's where I ask for the webinar date from Infusionsoft. And here is where I connect to my database, right here. And here's where I insert that value into my database. So this little thing, I just stored that information in the database. Looks pretty straightforward and simple, doesn't it? Now, where do you think I got this? Do you think I like conjured this out of my own head? Of course not, right? Which is the key message of this whole introduction to the API webinar. Right? Is this stuff all exists out here? And one of the best sources for it, even if you don't even know PHP, you go to php.net, which has the most amazing documentation. All you have to know is what you're asking for. You have to know that it can do it. But once you know it can do it, oh, I know that I can talk to a MySQL database with PHP. So I put in MySQL, and oh, here are all the things I can do with my database. So all I had to do was just go say, find what I wanted here and cut and copy and paste what I wanted here in terms of a snippet, right? Which is like here, and they give you all these examples, okay, that you can just learn to modify, stick that in your code, and you're off and running. Okay, so hopefully this is kind of making sense to you, the message that I'm trying to get across to you, which is not how we do it, because we'll do that together in the learning lab, but that you can do it. You can do this, even if you don't know that much about, or anything really about programming, because I didn't either. Okay, so this is step number 2: insert ID mobile send and sent into my MySQL database, which is here. Okay. Now, next thing we have then is so we're done with that. The person's registered, we've stuck it in the database, and it's just sitting there in that database until we need it. Now, could it be sitting in Infusionsoft? Sure, it could. But the problem is that Infusionsoft won't let me do what I want with it, which is to call it up an hour before the webinar. So that's why I had to put it over here in MySQL. Which is kind of my go-to when Infusionsoft won't let me do what I want with the data. So let me get this little control panel out of the way so I can scroll. Sorry, come here, scroll. Okay, so now step number 3 is cron. Now, what is cron? This again gives you, this is so simple, gives you so much power, just a building block. Again, well, so let me tell you what cron is. Cron is something that lives on, it's on your server. Okay, again, so you'd go to your host, in this case, HostGator, and down here at the bottom, you'll see something in your control panel. Now, you may use something other than control panel at your host, but there'll be something similar. Okay, and you see down here, advanced cron jobs. Okay, if you're like me, you never even went in your control panel for, right, but now I use my control. It's like all kinds of little gold nuggets in my control panel. Who knew I could do all these cool things with this stuff? So a cron, well, it tells you right here what a cron does. Can you guys see this? Cron jobs allow you to automate certain commands or scripts on your site. You can set a command or script to run at a specific time every day, week, month, minute. For example, you could set a cron job to delete temporary files every week to free up disk space, etc. Well, so guess what else you can do? You can create a little cron job that runs one of your scripts every so often. Now, this little script I have here, text reminder cron, okay, runs, this says this is running every 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes, this little cron job kicks off my cron script. Okay? Now, so what do you think that cron script is doing? Well, let's look at it. It's saying, okay, let's look in the database and let's find any records. That's what select means. Find records where now, meaning right this minute, date, time, this second, this nanosecond actually, is greater than send, because send is a date I put in there for when, date and time when I want the text sent. So if now is greater than send and sent is null, meaning we haven't sent it yet, then keep going. Okay, so it goes and it finds records where we're supposed to send it, but we haven't sent it yet. And then it says, okay, did we have any of those? And if the answer is no, it says, okay, we're done. Die. Just go look 15 minutes from now. And it just keeps doing that every 15 minutes until it finds records that need to be processed. Oh, it's an hour before the webinar. And guess what? A couple records come up. We need to send a text. So what happens now? So now we get to our number 4 building block. You guys, hopefully you understand cron. If you don't, you can ask me in the Q&A or whatever. But that's what cron does. Just sits out there and runs this little script, PHP or cron.php. And then, so when it finds rows to process, records that need to be sent, I am, in this case, using plus this. For those of you who don't know plus this, it's a little service that's recently been created by 6th Division. They've been they are Infusionsoft certified consultants like me, and they have developed a service where I think it starts at like $99 a month. They actually I get it for free, which is the only reason I'm using it. But essentially, what plus this and fix your funnel and tactical actions and all those, there's a bunch of them out there that people my fellow ICCs have developed. And essentially what those all are actually are, all they're doing is they're doing API calls. They're doing these little scripts that I'm telling you that you and I can write and I can teach you to write, and they're putting a slick interface in front of them. And they're, so all you're doing is instead of sending the HTTP post to your script on your server, you're actually just sending it to their script on their server. They're processing it, writing it back to your Infusionsoft database, and charging you $99 a month to do that. Some of them are even more than that. Like I think I hate to name names, but like Marketing Mavens has one script where it only does one thing for $99 or $97 a month. It takes a email that comes into an email box. It uses cron to check that email box. It then parses that email. Let's say it was an email sent by Gravity Forms or some other third-party system that you didn't have an API for. It checks that email, it parses it, and then it writes the relevant data into your Infusionsoft application. Well, again, that's actually parsing emails is my building block number 5. Remember, I told you there's 2 or 3 others that you won't use all the time, but if you have them, then it's like major. Well, so that's one of the ones that I is more little. We'll do another time, but parsing an email. So they're charging people $97 a month just to parse the emails for them, which again is like something I could easily teach you how to do. But nonetheless, because I have it and they've already written it, it's just easier to use them. And what I'm using them for is, because this is actually something I can't do, is to send the text, because they have a relationship with a text message provider that I don't have. So all I have to do is send an HTTP post to plus this, and it sends you a text. I've got to pass it your user ID and your mobile number, but then it sends you a text. Okay. Now, the thing is, the reason I'm using curl, what's curl? Curl is like a trick. So what the way that we would normally send this to your script is we'd fill out a form. And then the form would send the HTTP post. That's what an HTTP post is. It's the result of a form that gets sent to a server, right? And so normally that's how plus this would get what it wants. But I'm not filling out the form in the beginning. I'm not sending it to them right away. I'm sending it to them maybe days or weeks later. Some of you signed up for this weeks ago, right? So that data didn't send when you filled out the form. It sent to the database. Instead, I've got to send that data as if you filled out the form when I wanted to send it. So basically it's like it's how do I describe it this way? It's the computer, it's a program submitting a form as if a human did it. That's what curl does. And it's really handy. I have a little piece of curl that essentially fills out the form, if you will, and sends it to plus this. And I'll show you that little curl in a second. So that sends your ID to plus this. Plus this sends you a text that's out here somewhere. But then what my little script does is it says, okay, now go in the field called sent and just put in the current timestamp so we don't send it to them again, right? Because up here it's looking for sent is null. And that's it. Text message goes to you, and it does that for every one of you until it finds no one else to process, and then it comes back here and starts running every 15 minutes looking for more to send. And that's really the whole process. Now, when you learn how to do this, that's a real live business case that I could not do with Infusionsoft out of the box. But what I love about it is it's a really easy, simple use of our 4 most powerful building blocks. And so if I teach you how to build this, then you can start to combine these building blocks in new and different ways to solve other little issues and problems and roadblocks like this, right? So that's your, oh, and let me just show you curl. I mean, there's nothing to it. And again, I did not come up with this. Cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. Here's curl. Here's the thing that sends the form as if you had submitted it. That's all there is to it. It was super easy. I had to put in this and I had to put in this, and that was pretty much all I had to do. Cut, these 2 things, red and orange, that's all I had to change. Otherwise, this is all cut and paste. So that's it. So really, the thing is, you can find these building blocks, you can modify these building blocks. You just have to have the knowledge and the brain power about how to put together these logical flows. This is, like I said, this is one of those little bit more complex things, right? But to begin with, you're just going to use one of these, right, by itself to do one little thing. Or maybe then you'll start to combine it with these 2 together to do this other little thing. And then, oh yeah, I could do this and this and a curl and 2 crons, and and over time these get more and more complex. But at the end of the day, they're really just these little building blocks all put together, one on top of the other on top of the other. So that's kind of an overview, and so that's how we're gonna teach this, is by breaking this down, teaching you all how to do this all, and then having you do it, and then so that you can do on your own. All right, did I have anything else to show you here? I don't think so. So let me go back to my presentation here. So let's talk about the learning lab itself, just in case. So you know what I'm going to do. You hopefully know whether it would be relevant for you, helpful for you, worthwhile for you, profitable for you to learn this Infusionsoft API, whether it even appeals to you. I will tell you this, by the way, on that whether it appeals to you question. Even as a business owner, okay, because believe me, I have spent, I can't even tell you how many, literally millions of dollars I've spent on webs and websites and things over the years. I've thrown away $150,000 website before it ever saw the light of day. That tells you what bad experience I've had with some of our web developers over the years for my different companies. So I have some knowledge of this. I'm not just talking, out of the side of my mouth. Unfortunately, sadly, truth be told, even if you don't think you personally are ever going to write a scrap of code, of the API, I still think this is immensely valuable as a business owner, or as a consultant if you were like an ICC, an Infusionsoft certified consultant, because even in hiring a developer to do these things for you, number one, it's pretty hard to hire someone if you don't know. And I'll just give you an example, right? I tried to hire someone. I mean, I could have done it myself, but it just wasn't the most effective use of my time right then. And I needed someone to write a really fairly simple script. And what I wanted them to do was to use curl to submit a web form on the front on my homepage of my website. And that's all it was, right? And I hired this guy, and he kept insisting that, no, I shouldn't be using curl, no, I shouldn't be using curl, no, I shouldn't be using curl, and instead I should be doing all these API calls, right? Well, what I realized very quickly, because I knew what I was talking about, was this guy was going to do all this convoluted stuff that was going to take him hours and may or may not work because he didn't know how to write curl, which which is silly, right? I mean, some people just never took the time. Right. If you can't go look that up and you don't know what it is, then I was about to, I would have made a mistake hiring that guy. And we're not talking about a lot of money there. It was probably a $500 job, but it could have been a $200 job instead of a $500 job. So multiply that times whatever when you start to talk about big projects, and that knowledge about, it is really invaluable. And I will give you another real life use case too. um, in this day and age, Infusionsoft developers, particularly the good ones, are very difficult to come by. And the reason is that Infusionsoft is growing so fast that the good ones are really expensive for the most part. That's not always true, but for the most part, because they can be, and are booked solid. So your options, if you really want and need something quickly, are to end up often with a crap one, um, or the other alternative, which can be really more economical, is to go outside of the Infusionsoft ecosystem, hire someone who really is a good programmer, a good PHP programmer, a good WordPress developer, etc., who has all the skills except for Infusionsoft API. And if you know this and they are good, if you can give them a framework for what you want and how to do it. We, for example, went outside and hired non-Infusionsoft people to write an entire custom shopping cart that relies heavily on MySQL databases to get over some of the limitations of subscriptions and putting multiple products on the same subscription. Basically, we use MySQL databases for that. Well, we told them that's how to solve the problem. And then they turned around and wrote the code. And without that knowledge, we could have never pointed them in that direction, and we would have been stuck, or we would have had a terrible solution, or just being able to tell them that was worth an absolute ton of money, because this was a big 5-figure project. So if that makes sense. um okay, so back to, sorry, I got down a rabbit trail there, with you on that, but I think it's important for you to understand that this is not just valuable for those people who are going to actually sit down and write these scripts. As a business owner, to me, I think this is critical intelligence that you have to have, that you have to understand if your business is dependent on, to any large degree, Infusionsoft to make it profitable or more profitable, or create the kind of growth that you want, or whatever it was that you bought Infusionsoft in order to achieve. This is going to be very helpful. Okay, moving on. Sorry, got off my soapbox there. So if if you really want to shortcut your you could do this yourself. So I am not special. I one of my husband always says, I mean, I'm reasonably smart, obviously, but I think my special trait is that I'm just more dogged and persistent than most. So when I get my mind on something like this, then I will make myself sit down and do it and figure it out. And you could do that too. You absolutely could. And it'll take you, shorter or longer than me. It took me a good, 8 months really to get really proficient with it. So you could do it that way. And or the other option for you, one other option is to let me give you the shortcut for use, so I can just say this is this is everything I learned here. We're going to condense this down, and instead of 8 months, you can have this in a week. And you have to decide what that's worth to you. But if that's the route that you would like to take, I am doing the learning lab coming up in 2 weeks, I think it is. It will run from Tuesday, July 30th through Saturday, August 3rd. And what I do is I break it out into segments. There are five segments. Tuesday through Friday, it's from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we meet from 4 to 7 every night. And then on Saturday afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, we'll meet on Saturday from 11 to 3 Eastern Time. And I may even do on Sunday an optional Q&A only session for as long as you guys want it, where all we do is just sit, I mean, obviously we'll take, this is really, really interactive. We're actually sitting together on the computer working together. But at the end of it, you're still going to have like kind of probably big picture questions that you want answered or things that you're still unclear on or whatever. And I have found it helpful to just give you like a total 1 day of just Q&A. And if it takes an hour, great, we'll do an hour. If it takes you guys 4 hours, we'll do 4 hours, whatever. So and probably that would be Sunday while we still have the momentum, but we'll see. And we'll see if you need it too, but that's why it's not on the schedule. It just kind of depends on what everybody feels like at the end. So that's the timing of it. And the format is, as I said, it is online, and we do limit it to 10 people. It is highly interactive. We are going to be working as if you and I are sitting in a classroom together. Okay, so this is not like the membership site where they drip out the content and you watch the video and no, this is actually me teaching you in a group, just online instead of in a classroom, which is the way all the years I taught the Snyder investment method. I taught in a classroom. If you wanted to learn the Snyder method, you flew to Dallas and I taught you, and we did that with over 4,000 people over the years. This though, I'm going to do online, which I don't like as well as being in a classroom, because I like to see your face. I like to see when you're brows furrow because you're not getting something, that I can stop. And so I'll be a little bit more reliant on you to help me with stuff like that. But I know we can, I from experience now, I know that you can do it this way. Now, the lab format is this. Basic, and I borrowed this. I will tell you, this is not mine. I borrowed this from Jermaine Griggs. When I heard it and saw him do it and demonstrate it, model it, I thought it was awesome, and so I'm stealing it. So the format is, he calls it CIA, Concept, Implementation, Action. And so the way it works is, I explain it, then I do it, and then you do it, which is why we're doing this in 4-hour chunks. So we're going to take, I have to have time to take you through and explain the whole thing. We'll take lots of breaks too, by the way. And then I'm going to do it in front of you. I'm going to actually sit down, write the code, do the setup, do all the stuff behind the scenes, so you can see exactly what it looks like looking over my shoulder. And then you're going to turn around and you guys are going to do it. Okay. And then we'll discuss it and so forth. So that's kind of the format. That's how it works. You also will have resources beyond just the course itself. Number one, we will record the course, and that will be available to you in the archive all the time, whenever, so you can go back and review that anytime you need to. I am also working on an API code cookbook, which I plan to have out in August of 2013 for my Learning Lab participants. I will give that to you as part of the Learning Lab when it is finished. So, and that is basically all of the code that I've put together and am still continuing to put together. In case you don't know, if you go to the forums much, I actually I try a couple times a week to take a question out of the forum and sit down and actually write the code for the question. And the reason I do that is because one, man, I wish I had had that when I was trying to learn this. You know, like I told you, no, everything was really cryptic. You know, nobody really gave you a fully baked solution. But it's also been an amazing learning tool for me, because that means rather than just kind of, you know, dashing off oh yeah, well, you do this, this, and this, you have to put your money where your mouth is and actually put it in code. And I have learned so much by enforcing that discipline on myself of doing that. But anyway, so I've got a fair amount of code that I've either written myself and or paid other people to write for me. And what my hope is, you can see the next point, access to me in the community. So the other thing that you get as a lab graduate is, you know, the ability for, you know, I will be happy to help you with um, your projects as you're working on them and as you're learning and helping you and pointing you in the right direction, and which is all well and good. But as we do this, because this is still really new, still really early days, um, what I hope we build, which is one of my main goals in doing this, quite frankly, the thing that I was missing and that I wanted so desperately when I was learning this was a community of people who were at the same level of learning as me, right? Instead of all the geeks and, you know, speaking Greek that I didn't understand, if there had been, you know, hundreds of people out there who had learned it the same way I did and knew kind of at the same level as I, that I could go to and say, what does this mean? How did you solve this? Because the way, I got to tell you, right? If you look at my code, even though I'm told by people who write, you know, who are really power programmers, they say I write really nice code, it still doesn't look anything like their code, because it's the difference between like a fourth grader who writes with perfect grammar and a college student who writes with perfect grammar. It doesn't matter. We both may use the exact same grammar to express the exact same thing, but the way we do it and the way we say it is going to be different. You know, I write fourth grade perfect grammar, not PhD grammar. And so what I would love to have is a bunch of fourth graders around, right? Or even kindergartners, or, you know, that group. That's what's missing. We have a barbell community here. We have a bunch of people in Infusionsoft who are really, really, you know, knowledgeable, and then we have all of us who don't really know hardly anything. And not and so anyway, my hope is in doing this that I will be able to create a community that is of value and useful to all of us as we move forward to one another. And so access to the community is to me, a major benefit of this learning lab. And the reason I got off on this is what I started to say was that what I hope is that as we work on projects together as a community and we help one another, that you all will begin to contribute your code to the cookbook as well, so that what we, again, because the more, see, this is the thing, right? The more, it's all cut and paste, the more code we have in the cookbook, the faster and more effective we all become, because we start to leverage the learning and the projects and the experience of one another. But it takes a village. Sorry, I just had to. We don't have a village. So that's part of what I really, really, really want to build here, is that village. And so I'm going to contribute all of my code to the cookbook, but I hope it will continue to grow over time, because I hope that all of you will be contributing yours as well. So those are the resources you get. Tuition. We've actually already had our first price increase. I hate to tell you. The tuition is, well, maybe I don't hate to tell you, because you might guess that I have a special offer for you coming. But anyway, the tuition is $2,497, or you can do it as a 3-pay of $915 in 3 equal payments. It is absolutely fully refundable. If you put up your tuition and between now and the course you decide you change your mind, all you got to do is let me know and I will absolutely refund you every penny. That has always been my policy for years and years and years, as has my no hoops no hassles guarantee. Even if you take the class and you just say, you know what, this is not for me, I thought it was going to be one thing, it was something else, I thought the class was not what I thought it was going to be, doesn't matter. Absolutely does not matter what your reason is. You let me know that. No hoops, no hassles. I'll refund your money and we'll still be friends. So that's how that works. Always had it, never had to use it. I have complete confidence in my ability to teach. That's the one thing I know how to do really, really well. So as you might imagine, as with most webinars, there is a special offer for you being here. So if you would like to take advantage of this, is since you took your time out to be here, what I will do is I will knock off $500 and give you the old price of $1,997, or 3 payments of $735. Going forward, the new price, if anyone just wants to buy it and they outside of this, then they'll have to pay the $24.97. But here you are, $19.97, or a 3-pay of $735. So that's a $500 savings. And the other thing that I will give you, in addition to $500 savings, since this is early days, and this is not new to me, right? I told you I built another, I started teaching friends in a my investment method in a conference room at work, right? And built that into 4,000 people and $500 million. So I understand that in the early days of something like this, we're going to learn a lot together. And we're going to make tons of improvements to the course and to the materials and to the, because you just can't help it. People are going to say, hey, how come we don't do this? And I'm going to say, oh my gosh, because I never thought of that. Right. And so, and in the early days, that happens a lot. As it becomes more established, it happens less and less frequently. But so for that reason, I'm also offering to you guys, and this will not stay around for very long, but to you guys, I will offer updates and upgrades for life. And then the other thing, which I already told you, you get all that the course video archive, the API cookbook, and the community support. And it's fully protected by our guarantees. But here's the catch. You do have to register to get this price by Monday. And you have to use this link to do that. And I'll tell you why. I'm actually moving into my new house. We've been working for 9 months on a new house that we built here on our farm in South Carolina. And believe it or not, can you believe this? I scheduled the course, and then we had to push the move date back to from the 22nd to the 29th. So the same week of the course happens to be the date that my mother is showing up to help me move into the new house. So I really, really, really want to know who's going to be in this class by Monday. So that, because I've got a lot of juggling and planning to do. So I need to get this organized, and I would really, it's going to be easier for me if I know that now instead of the day before the class. So if you want this, you can still register late, but if you want the $500 in the lifetime upgrades, Monday, please. Like I said, if you change your mind, I'll give you a refund. But if you know you're going to come, then just register, okay? And that way I can plan. The link is bit.ly 0722, because that's the date that you have to have your registration in to get the special price. All right. And let's see what else. Questions. Questions. So if anyone has, we've got a few minutes left. It's 2:20 here in South Carolina. And so if I will take a few questions, answer a few questions, and then we will wrap up and I will get you out of here on time. So if you would like to ask me a question about any of this, then just type it in your question box down at the bottom. Um, okay. And sorry, I'm looking and reading. Um, okay, couple questions. Okay. Oh well, I'm gonna paraphrase. I think the best way to paraphrase this question is, will I be lost? Um, and I've tried to address this, as I went along, but I absolutely understand the fear. Because if you don't know it and you've never done it, then you definitely, it's something that you worry about. I get that. And the answer is, I don't know if you'll be lost. Honestly, I'd love to say no, 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 you won't be lost. But I mean, again, this is not my first rodeo. I did this with a really, complex investment method that, our book was 200 pages that we took people through step by step, and I made that as absolutely paint by number as someone possibly could. And the investment course we had, we had screenshots on it. Put your log in, put your user ID here, put your password here, click this button to log on. And the fact of the matter is, some people's brains work different, and it doesn't mean you're not smart. But this sort of, I tend to be a very linear thinker. I think in processes. This kind of stuff comes easy to me because I think in linear processes. And lots of people do. Most people do. And 99% of the people, the way I teach, I'm entirely confident in my ability to teach something like this. What I have, the only caveat is, I'm not 100% certain that your brain works, in this way. And there are some people who, sometimes just they don't get it. They just don't get it. And that's why I have a money back guarantee. So if you just now, but here's the other thing I will say about our investment method that I think applies here too. A lot of times people, it's why we had a book, and it's why we had paint by number, and it's why we had community, and we had all those things before all those things anyone there were even names for those things. And the reason is, a lot of times people would kind of feel lost, when they left the class, but they had all the support and the book and stuff. And I would say, look, just, you have the tools, okay? Just go do it for a couple of months, come back, and then let's meet again. And because I promise you that once you actually do it a few times, it will make so much more sense than what it did, when you're getting bombarded with so much information in class. And 99 times out of 100, that was the case, right? Even when they were feeling a little overwhelmed when they left the class, a couple months of actually doing it, working exercises or what have you. And I'm going to give you, what ways to exercise this muscle once you've learned it, because you have to use it or you will lose it. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know why I found this so hard." And so anyway, that was a really long-winded, answer to your question. But I hope you won't be lost. I will do my absolute best to make sure that you're not lost. I will encourage you to push through, even if you still feel a little lost. And if at the end you just like want to throw up your hands, then, that's why we have money back guarantee. Whew. Okay. Okay. And the another question is, what do I need to take the course? Well, you don't really need anything. In the setup guide, which I'm going to send you, it walks you through, kind of getting your server set up and running that first little test script. And in order to do that, you need a couple of things. You need access to your server through like a control panel, similar to what I just showed you. You need the ability to FTP files back and forth, for example. And to do that, you'll need a free FTP client, which most of you, I suspect, have and use already all the time. And then, you'll need a text editor. Now, what I showed you is actually a paid text editor called Coda. It's just for Mac, which I love and adore and was worth spending money on. But particularly when you're first getting started, you do not need something like this. Just text edit if you're on a Mac or WordPad, or there's Smultron, or there's bunches of them. You can go look them up. That are free will be more than sufficient for what we are doing. So there's nothing to, you don't need to go out and buy any software. And in terms of, knowledge or prerequisites, you need to be a Infusionsoft, what I would call a power user. If you find Infusionsoft totally intimidating and confusing, then this is probably not going to be for you. I will tell you that up front. But as long as are reasonably competent at Infusionsoft, then I think you can probably do this. Now, the HTML or PHP, you said, if you know it, it's a big bonus, obviously. If you've ever even seen it or done any programming in high school or anything, anything that will obviously make this easier. But if you don't know any of it, then that's okay too. We're going to assume that you don't know anything and basically start from scratch. And if you do know something, it'll be a good refresher for you. Um, can I take it again? Well, sort of. I mean, I don't know. Well, we can talk about that, but because we'll have the videos and everything, and we'll keep those updated as the course, moves along, and you can basically take it again anytime that you want. So that should be fairly easy. And all right, and that question I think I already answered previously. So that is it for the questions that I've got. If you guys don't have any more, then I am going to close this up and try to get you guys out of here by on time. So what I again, this was less about cron and PHP, and what I really wanted you to take out of this introduction was a key message. Number one, actually, I should say that there were a couple of key messages. What I really hope you see is how powerful this is, how absolutely amazing, how it just really opens up Infusionsoft to the full promise that we were given when we bought the thing. Really, at the end of the day, if you can dream it, you can do it, bend it to your will. Those are all totally true. But the other message is, so not only that, but if I can do it, you can do it. So it's really cool. You can have it, you can do it, and don't let any of those kind of nagging fears that I mentioned earlier keep you from at least checking it out, because I think you'll find it to be really, really, really powerful. Again, the link is bit.ly-07-22 if you'd like to register before Monday, please. And if you have any questions for me, or if I can just help you with anything, whether it's questions, projects, bouncing ideas off of me, this is like my new favorite topic. So, except Polo, that's still more my favorite topic. But building businesses, the API, and Polo, those are kind of my big three. So let me know how I can help you, and feel free to contact me, and I will, if I'm not available, I will get right back to you. So thanks so much, everybody, for being on this call. I really appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure for most of you is a busy schedule. And I hope that I get a chance to meet with and talk with all of you more personally in the very near future. Have a great afternoon, everybody.